Doctor Sleep is the follow-up to the 1977 novel The Shining. Mike Flanagan was brought to direct the film adaptation, after previously directing Gerald's Game. Flanagan was faced with a problem, however. The Shining film, directed by Kubrick, strayed a lot from the original novel, and Doctor Sleep was heavily reliant on the mythology of the novel. For that reason, Flanagan would state that this film is an adaptation of Doctor Sleep, which is Stephen King's sequel to his novel, The Shining. But this also exists very much in the same cinematic universe that Stanley Kubrick created. The film follows Danny, who is now a grown adult trying to hunt down a group of immortals who prey on the shining of young children. The film stars Ewan McGregor and Rebecca Ferguson. Hey guys, and welcome to the final Garage Stephen-King-a-thon. I am dressed in my Halloween costume, which is Steve Jobs. You guys want to see my Steve Jobs impersonation? Here it goes. Guys, get back to work. I created the iPad, not you, engineers. That was my impression. Okay, guys, this is the last one. We're watching Doctor Sleep. I didn't catch Doctor Sleep in theaters because I kind of had, sequel fatigue. I kind of had, fatigue of, oh, let's do a sequel, and now it's 20 years later, and the character's a drunk, and yada. It felt very like Star Wars Episode 7, and there was a lot of those coming out at the time, and I just skipped on this one. But I watched it shortly after its theatrical release with my brother. He made me watch it because he enjoyed it quite a bit. I'm not the biggest Mike Flanagan guy, but my brother loves this director, so I figured, okay, I'll give it a shot. The first time I watched it, I did not enjoy it, but this is the second time I watch it, and I will say the first time I watched it, the reason why I didn't enjoy it is because to me it wasn't a horror movie, really. It felt a little too supernatural compared to the original Shining. I feel like it didn't fit with the original Shining, and my brother's coming at this with a different angle. He's read the books, both The Shining and Doctor Sleep. I didn't read either of those, so our perspectives are a little different. The main problem that comes when you adapt this novel is the fact that the book, The Shining, is so completely different from the film, The Shining. It's a little bit like a similar problem Blade Runner 2049 had, but I feel like that one actually succeeded. There's some audience members that are familiar with the theatrical release of Blade Runner. There's some people that are familiar with the director's cut of Blade Runner. There's some people that are just familiar with the final cut of Blade Runner. And they're all pretty different in their ending. In the theatrical cut, Harrison Ford is not a robot. In the final cut, he is a robot. So where do you go from there if you're making a sequel to Blade Runner? Well, I think Denis Villeneuve, when he did Blade Runner 2049, handled it quite well. Whereas this movie, I feel like doesn't do it as well. It doesn't handle it as well. The main problem here being that the themes of both movies are different. The theme of the novel seems to sway more on the theme of alcoholism. Stephen King was struggling with his addiction at the time, and the whole book is an allegory for his alcoholism, which isn't really a thing in the Kubrick version. Yes, there are some moments of, you see, Jack Torrance drinking, but it's not an allegory for alcoholism. To me, when I watch the Shining movie, it's about how regular folks can become cruel and murderous and villainous. That, to me, is the theme of the Kubrick movie. That said, I don't think this is a terrible movie, this Doctor Sleep movie. I think there's a lot to admire in this. Let me just go get a drink real quick.
2 hours later.
Yes, I am drinking blue Mio weird stuff, blue raspberry, whatever. Don't judge me, I still know what I'm talking about here. I'm not a little kiddo. So yeah, there's still a lot to appreciate in this movie. First of all, the movie opens and you're back in the time period of the first movie. You're introduced to young Danny and a replacement for Shelley Duvall.
Hey, it's okay, Doc. It's okay.
Which I actually really like that. I like the fact that he didn't do some CG de-aging and it looked distracting. To me, it was distracting that Shelley Duvall wasn't in this movie for 0.0001 seconds. We also see a flashback sequence with Jack Nicholson's character, but he's not played by Jack Nicholson, and I thought he did a really good job as well.
If you don't mind my saying, Mr. Torrance, you seem put upon. Put upon.
I much prefer this route over the CG de-aging route. It just works better. That said, when it comes to the replacement for Shelley Duvall, I feel like Shelley Duvall has such a distinct look that when they replaced her, it kind of just looks like some random girl with a black wig. Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall.
Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall. Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall. Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall. Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall.
I don't know. To me, Shelley Duvall, everyone talks about Jack Nicholson's performance in that movie. I love Shelley Duvall's performance in that movie. Anyway, what am I saying? Other things that I like the fact that Danny is a bit of a scumbag in this. The fact that his father is an alcoholic was passed down to him, kind of showing that alcoholism usually runs in the family, which it does.
What's your name again, cutie?
Dan.
Dan.
And this movie doesn't pull any punches. This movie goes all out. This movie has a pretty brutal scene of child torture, which is something you don't see often in movies. Yes, we saw it in the It movie, and I mentioned it in the It movie, but I'm gonna mention it again. It makes the threat truly terrifying when you know these people will fucking kill children. That just heightens the stakes to me. I enjoy that.
Are you gonna hurt me?
Yeah. Pain purifies steam. Fear too, so you understand.
And there's some pretty awesome cinematography in this. A lot of homages to Stanley Kubrick's cinematography style. They even directly take shots from the Kubrick movie and recreate them here, which those I wasn't a fan of as much. The shot that really impressed me in this is there's a shot of Rebecca Ferguson's character flying. And it feels like as if Stanley Kubrick shot that one particular shot. It really felt precise and exact. I like that sequence in general. The problem I have here is this movie is 2.5 hours. And the director's cut is 3 hours. And that was the version I watched. And I don't feel like the extra half hour added all that much. But I will say I enjoyed the movie a bit more on rewatch. Just because I knew that this isn't going to be a terrifying sequel to the original The Shining. This is just an adaptation of the book Dr. Sleep to the screen. So once I got my expectations in check, I was able to appreciate this movie a little bit more. That said, it's far from a perfect movie in my opinion. The first problem I have is if this movie is going to be 2.5 hours long or 3 hours long, depending on the version, you need to have a lot more going on. And I'm not talking in terms of action. I feel like this movie delivered enough action for my taste. It's not in terms of scares either. I feel like this movie did have enough scares. It was more in terms of character conflict. The character, the young child in this movie, I forget her name in the movie, she doesn't really go through any internal conflict. What if this character struggles with her shining, but she did have it, but it was just super powerful, and she had to learn how to control it, and Ewan McGregor worked with her? That would be an example of an internal struggle that would kind of get me hooked for this movie for its full runtime. But instead, she's kind of just there and doesn't really go through much. Sure, her dad dies, but she seems to forget it. Like, they're driving away and she's not even crying, which is kind of odd.
I'm sorry about your father.
Sorry about your friend.
I don't know. I feel like there was a lack of just some emotion in her, just some struggle in that character. Same thing when it comes to Ewan McGregor's character. I love his name. Ewan. Yeah, same thing when it came to his character. We're introduced to him, and I loved his introduction. He's in bed with a naked woman, and there's puke all over the bed. There's a baby in the corner of the room, and he steals money after doing a day of cocaine. I liked that, but he gets over his struggle relatively quickly. Early on in the film, there's an 8-year jump, they say 8 years later, and all of a sudden, Ewan McGregor is no longer an alcoholic, and he's a stable citizen. And there are a few scenes of him picking up the bottle and then dropping it. But other than that, I wish he went through more struggle. What if he had to go on this mission? He was reluctant to it. He's an alcoholic, but he's kind of dragged into it. Something like that. Just something to get me hooked in terms of character conflicts. There seemed to be a lot lacking here. And yes, the stake of this group of people preying on children and eating their shining is quite scary and is quite threatening, and you want these characters to accomplish their goals, but it's just, that's not what humans relate to. When we watch movies, we're humans, when we watch movies, we don't really connect with the eating of the shining. What connects with us is Ewan McGregor's battle with alcoholism. That's what should be the focus of this movie. Some of us struggle with addiction. Like, that's the thing that humans hook on to, and that's the thing that will really get you rooting for this character. Unfortunately, the character doesn't really have that thing. But as far as development goes, I feel like the least developed one is the villain in here. They give her zero mythology, which I usually appreciate in a horror movie, because the more you keep this character ambiguous, the more scary it becomes. But this character isn't quite frightening, nor is the film trying to. So give her a little more development. I don't know anything about this Rebecca Ferguson character. I know she wears a pretty cool top hat, and I think her look is good, and I think Rebecca Ferguson does a pretty good job with her performance. She's really enjoying this performance, I can tell. But it's like, what is this character? What decade is she from? Is she from 20 years ago? Is she from 50 years ago? Is she from 1,000 years ago? I would like to know that. That would add a little bit of dimension to her character. What is her motivation? Why did she take this decision to become an immortal and to become basically a vampire? She's basically a vampire who uses the fuel of the living in order to fuel herself. That's her thing, but I want to know, why did she choose that path? That would have made such a more interesting character. I'm sure all of those questions are answered in the book. It's just when it came to the movie, it's really monotone, it's very flat, not a lot of room for character development in here. And that's the thing I usually hook on to movies. You watch any other Stephen King movie adaptation that I enjoyed. I really liked Carrie, for example, the original one. I think Carrie is the best one. I feel like what works in that movie is that it talks about a woman's struggle in society. It's about how society is really rough on women. That's what makes me connect with Carrie. I couldn't care less about the telekinetic stuff that goes on. Yes, it's a cool element and I enjoy watching it from an action perspective, but that's not what brings me back to Carrie. The thing that brings me to Carrie is that it's about a woman's struggle in society. This movie could have had that. It could have been the movie about alcoholism and addiction and getting over it, because there's a cool contrast going on. Ewan McGregor's character is an ex-addict, and the antagonist in this movie is a current addict. She's just addicted to The Shining, and she has to pursue that struggle. And there's never that moment where Ewan McGregor and Rebecca Ferguson talk to one another about alcoholism or struggling with addiction and stuff like that. Yes, I was an addict at some point in my life, yada yada yada. That would have made for an interesting thing. I feel like the point of the movie was kind of missed in this, to be quite honest. That's what I think of the movie Dr. Sleep. Guys, it's been a pleasure having you along for this Garage Stephen-King-a-thon. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you're new to this one, go back and watch some of the previous videos where I talk about basically all the Stephen King horror movies out there. And guys, I'll see you around. We're returning to normal Garage movie reviews next week. See ya.